The champagne glass felt cold against my palm as my sister's voice cut through the party chatter like a blade. 23 years of shared childhood memories, family dinners, and whispered secrets in the dark, all reduced to one moment of public humiliation. "Oh, this is my younger brother," Sarah announced to her circle of perfectly manicured friends, her voice dripping with condescension. "Still figuring out what he wants to be when he grows up." I stood there, frozen. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, just dismissive. Worse somehow. "Sarah," I said quietly, hoping she'd catch herself before diving deeper. But she was already in full performance mode. The sister I'd grown up with had vanished, replaced by someone desperate to impress strangers who would forget her name by morning. "He's been living in our parents' basement for 2 years now. Still trying to make it as an entrepreneur," she made air quotes around the word, like it was a joke. "Mom keeps asking when he's going to get a real job." The circle of faces turned toward me with that particular brand of pity reserved for family embarrassments. I felt something inside me crack. Not break entirely, just crack. Like the first fissure in a dam before the flood. "That's not exactly how it is," I managed, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. "Come on, Daniel. We're all adults here." Sarah's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "You're 32 and living at home. That's literally the definition of a freeloader." The word hung in the air like smoke. Freeloader. I set my champagne glass down on the marble kitchen counter, the small clink somehow deafening in the sudden quiet that followed. Sarah's friends were looking anywhere but at me now, suddenly fascinated by their phones or the abstract art on her walls. "I think I should go," I said. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "I'm just being honest. Someone has to tell you the truth." The truth. As if she knew anything about my truth. I walked toward the door of her downtown condo, each step measured and deliberate. Behind me, the conversation resumed, lighter now, as if my presence had been weighing it down. But just before I reached the hallway, I heard her voice one more time, pitched just loud enough for me to catch. "He's always been the sensitive one. Never could handle reality." I didn't turn around, didn't give her the satisfaction. I just kept walking, through her door, down the hallway, into the elevator, and out into the night where the city lights blurred together like tears. The drive home was a 40-minute funeral procession for whatever relationship Sarah and I had left. I'd been fooling myself, thinking we were still close despite the growing distance of the past few years. She'd gotten her marketing degree, landed her corporate job, bought her condo, and somewhere along the way decided I didn't fit into her carefully curated life. The basement apartment I'd been renting from our parents wasn't much to look at, but it had been perfect for the past 2 years. Cheap rent meant I could pour every dollar into my business. Every sacrifice had a purpose. Every late night, every skipped dinner, every social event I'd missed because I was coding instead of networking. But Sarah saw none of that. She saw a 32-year-old man living in his childhood home and assumed she understood the whole story. I sat at my desk until 3 in the morning, staring at the screen that displayed my company's financials. The numbers that nobody in my family knew about except my accountant and my business partner. The numbers that would have made Sarah's marketing salary look like pocket change. 2 years ago, I'd sold my first startup to a tech giant for 8 figures. Not life-changing money by Silicon Valley standards, but enough to set me up comfortable for life if I played it smart. Which I did. I'd immediately invested in 3 other ventures, 2 of which had already paid off spectacularly. My second company, the one I was running from my parents' basement, had just closed a Series B funding round that valued us at $50 million. My 30% stake wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real, tangible wealth that showed up in my bank statements every month. But I'd never told anyone. Not our parents, not Sarah, not even my closest friends. Old habits from growing up in a family where money was always tight, where success was something that happened to other people, not us. Maybe I'd been protecting myself from exactly what happened tonight. The assumption that because I lived simply, I was somehow failing. Or maybe I'd just been waiting for the right moment to prove everyone wrong. I opened my laptop and started researching downtown real estate. If Sarah thought her two-bedroom condo was impressive, she was about to learn what real money could buy. The penthouse I'd been watching for 6 months was still on the market. 42nd floor, corner unit, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. The listing price was obscene, even by downtown standards. The kind of money that made people think twice before writing the check. I called my realtor at 8 in the morning. "Daniel, are you serious about the Meridian penthouse?" "Dead serious. Full cash offer. No contingencies." The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. "Daniel, that's a $12 million property." "I know what it costs, Jessica." "Cash? No financing at all. Wire transfer. I want it settled by the end of the week." 3 days later, I was standing in my new living room, 42 floors above the city where my sister had called me a failure. The view was ridiculous. At night, the lights stretched out like a circuit board, all the way to the horizon. I didn't post about it on social media. Didn't tell our parents. Didn't call Sarah to gloat. I just lived in it, quietly, like I'd lived with my success for the past 2 years. But downtown is a small world. Within 2 weeks, word had spread through Sarah's professional circle that someone had bought the infamous Meridian penthouse, the property everyone talked about but nobody could afford. I was debugging code on a Tuesday afternoon when Sarah finally called. "Daniel?" Her voice was different, smaller somehow. "Hey, Sarah. Listen, I heard the weirdest rumor, and I just had to call you to laugh about it together." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city spread below me. "What kind of rumor?" "Someone told me you bought the penthouse in the Meridian building. Can you believe that? I mean, obviously that's insane, right? But I figured you'd get a kick out of hearing what people are saying." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Daniel? You there?" "Yeah, I'm here." "So, obviously that's ridiculous, right? I mean, that place is like, what, $10 million or something crazy?" "12 million, I said quietly. "Right, exactly. 12 million, which is obviously completely." "Wait, how did you know that?" I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at the city. Somewhere down there was the building where Sarah worked, where she was probably sitting at her desk, slowly realizing that the rumor she'd called to laugh about might not be a rumor at all. "Because I live here, Sarah." The phone went dead quiet. Not even breathing. "Sarah? You're joking." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm standing in the living room right now, looking out at the city. It's a nice view." "That's impossible. Daniel, you live in Mom and Dad's basement. You don't have $12 million. "I have more than that." The admission hung in the air like a confession. For 2 years, I'd been living a double life, letting everyone believe I was struggling while my bank account grew fat on investments and business success. It had felt like armor, protecting me from expectations and family drama. But armor is heavy, and sometimes you have to take it off to breathe. "I don't understand," Sarah's voice cracked. "How do you have $12 million? "I sold my first company 2 years ago. Been working on the second one since then from the basement. Turns out you can build a pretty successful business from anywhere, even a place you consider beneath you." The silence that followed was profound. I could almost hear the gears turning in Sarah's head, recalculating everything she thought she knew about her younger brother. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I liked being underestimated. It's useful when people think you're a failure. They leave you alone to work." "Daniel," she trailed off. "You called me a freeloader, Sarah. At a party. In front of your friends. You were embarrassed by me." "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did. You meant exactly that. And you know what? It's fine. I understand why you'd think that. I've been living quietly, keeping my head down, not making a big show of success. But the truth is, I could have bought your condo 10 times over without making a dent in my net worth." I could hear her breathing now, shallow and quick. "I had no idea. Daniel, if I had known." "You would have treated me differently?" "That's exactly the problem, Sarah. Your respect was conditional on how much money you thought I had. That's not fair. Isn't it? When you introduced me to your friends, what did you lead with? My character? My intelligence? My sense of humor?
No.
You led with my living situation and my perceived lack of success. That's who I was to you. A family embarrassment. The city lights were starting to twinkle below as the sun set behind the skyline. I'd been having this conversation for 20 minutes, and it felt like I was watching my relationship with Sarah reshape itself in real time. I'm sorry, she said finally. I'm really, truly sorry. I was showing off for people who don't matter, and I threw you under the bus to make myself look better. That's inexcusable. Her apology sounded genuine, but apologies are cheap. Actions matter more than words, and her actions had revealed something about how she saw me, how she saw our relationship, how she measured worth. I appreciate the apology. Would it be okay if I came to see your place? I still can't quite believe it's real. There it was. The moment I'd been unconsciously waiting for since I'd signed the papers. My sister, who had been embarrassed to introduce me to her friends, was now asking for a tour of my penthouse. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. You want to see the place where the freeloader lives now? Daniel, please. I know I screwed up, but you're my brother. I want to celebrate with you. I want to understand what you've built. I looked around the penthouse, at the marble countertops and hardwood floors and modern art that came with the furnished unit. At the view that made me feel like I was floating above the world instead of struggling beneath it. Okay, I said finally. But Sarah?
Come alone.
No friends, no photos for social media, no making this about you or your image. Just us. Of course, just us. Saturday afternoon. I'll text you the address. After I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking slightly. Not from nerves, but from something else. Relief, maybe. Or vindication. For 2 years, I'd been carrying the weight of other people's assumptions about my life, my choices, my worth. But now the truth was out there, at least with Sarah. The armor was off, and I could breathe again. Saturday afternoon arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that made the penthouse feel even more like a refuge from the world below. I'd spent the morning cleaning, not because the place was dirty, but because I needed something to do with my nervous energy. The phone call from the lobby came at exactly 2 o'clock. Daniel? It's Sarah. I'm downstairs. Come on up. 42nd floor. I watched the elevator numbers climb on the display panel next to my door. 37, 38, 39. Each floor was another moment for me to wonder if this was a mistake, if I should have left the past buried instead of digging it up. The elevator chimed softly, and I opened the door before Sarah could knock. She stood in the hallway for a moment, just staring past me into the apartment. Her mouth was slightly open, her carefully composed professional facade cracked wide enough to show genuine shock underneath. Jesus, Daniel.
Come in.
She stepped past me, moving slowly, like she was in a museum. The living room opened up before her, 30 feet of floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city spread out below like a map. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the space. This is incredible. It's home now. She walked to the windows and pressed her palm against the glass. You can see everything from up here. The whole city. That's the idea. For several minutes, she just looked. I let her process it, let the reality of the situation sink in. This wasn't a tour anymore. This was a reckoning. The kitchen is over here, I said, leading her to the marble island that could seat 8 people comfortably. And there's a study through that door where I actually do most of my work. She followed me through the apartment like she was sleepwalking. The master suite with its king-size bed and spa bathroom. The second bedroom I'd converted into an office. The den with its leather furniture and built-in bar. Daniel, she said finally, when we'd completed the circuit and returned to the living room. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. That night at my party, when I said all those horrible things about you, did you already own this place? I nodded. I'd closed on it 3 days earlier. Her face went pale. She sank into one of the leather chairs, suddenly looking very small in the vast space. So when I called you a freeloader, when I embarrassed you in front of my friends, you were already living here, in a $12 million penthouse. Technically, I was still moving in, but yes. And you just
Took it.
You didn't defend yourself. You didn't tell me I was wrong. What was I supposed to say, Sarah? Pull out my bank statements? Start listing my assets? That would have made me look desperate and petty. She covered her face with her hands. I am such an idiot. You're not an idiot. You just made assumptions based on incomplete information. No, Daniel. I'm an idiot because even if you were living in mom and dad's basement, even if you were struggling financially, I shouldn't have humiliated you like that. It was cruel and unnecessary and completely beneath who I thought I was as a person. This was the conversation I'd been hoping for without realizing it. Not just an apology for being wrong about my financial situation, but an acknowledgement that her behavior was unacceptable regardless of my circumstances. Why did you do it? I asked quietly. Sarah was quiet for a long time, staring out at the city. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with something that sounded like shame. Because I was embarrassed. Not of you, exactly, but of
Us.
our family. Growing up poor, dad struggling to keep the construction business afloat, mom working 2 jobs just to keep us fed. I worked so hard to get away from all that, to build this respectable middle-class life where nobody looks at me with pity. She took a shaky breath. And then you were just
There.
living simply, not caring about appearances, not playing the game the way I thought you had to play it. It made me feel like maybe all my striving and posturing was pointless. So I lashed out. I tried to make you the failure, so I could be the success story. Her honesty was unexpected. I'd been prepared for defensiveness, excuses, attempts to minimize what had happened. Instead, she was giving me something much more valuable, the truth about her motivations. Sarah, you don't have to prove anything to those people. Your friends, your colleagues. You're successful in your own right. You have your own career, your own life. But it never feels like enough. There's always someone with a bigger condo, a better job, a more impressive boyfriend. I got caught up in keeping score, and I used you as a way to make myself look better by comparison. I walked to the windows and looked down at the city. From up here, all the ambition and striving and competition looked very small. Want to know a secret? She looked up at me. I almost turned down the acquisition offer for my first company. Not because the money wasn't good, but because I was scared of what would happen if I suddenly had wealth. I was afraid it would change who I was, change how people saw me. Is that why you've been living so quietly? Hiding your success?
Partly.
But also because I genuinely enjoyed the work more than the money. Building something from nothing, solving problems, creating value. The money was just a byproduct. Sarah stood up and joined me at the windows. We stood side by side, looking out at the urban landscape below. I've been thinking about that night every day since it happened, she said quietly. Replaying what I said, how I said it, the look on your face when you left. I knew I'd crossed a line, but I was too proud to call and apologize. What changed? Rachel Morris. The name was familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. She works in real estate development. She was at the party that night in the circle when I said those things about you. She called me last week and asked if I was related to Daniel Morrison, the guy who just bought the Meridian penthouse for cash. Sarah turned to face me fully. She said she'd looked you up online after hearing about the purchase. Found articles about your first company, your current ventures, your investments. She said you're worth somewhere north of $50 million, and that's just what's public knowledge. The number was bigger than I'd expected anyone to calculate from the outside, but not inaccurate. Rachel asked me why I'd been so dismissive of my incredibly successful brother at the party. She said it seemed like maybe there was some family drama she didn't understand. Sarah's voice got very quiet. I had to tell her the truth. That I didn't know. that I'd been so wrapped up in my own insecurities that I never bothered to actually understand what my brother was doing with his life. We stood in silence for several minutes, watching the afternoon light shift across the cityscape. The rain had stopped, and patches of blue sky were starting to break through the clouds. Daniel? Yeah. I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance we can find our way back to being brother and sister again? Real brother and sister, not the performative version I've been playing for the past few years. I thought about the question seriously. Trust, once broken, doesn't repair itself automatically. But Sarah's honesty, her willingness to examine her own motivations and admit her mistakes, meant something. I'd like that, I said finally. But things need to be different going forward. Different how? No more assumptions. No more treating me like a project that needs fixing. No more measuring my worth based on how I choose to live my life. Done. And Sarah? The next time you're tempted to throw someone under the bus to make yourself look better, especially someone in your own family, remember how this felt. Remember what it cost us. She nodded, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. I will. I promise. We spent the next 2 hours talking, really talking for the first time in years. Not the surface-level conversations about work and weather that had become our default, but deep discussions about our childhoods, our fears, our dreams, our complicated relationship with money and success, and family expectations. Sarah told me about the pressure she felt to justify her expensive education, to prove to our parents that their sacrifices had been worthwhile. I told her about the loneliness of keeping my success secret, the strange isolation that came with having resources but not being able to share that reality with the people closest to me. As the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the skyscraper windows like fire, I realized something had shifted between us. Not back to the easy closeness of childhood, but toward something more mature and honest. I should probably head home, Sarah said eventually. Before you go, I said, walking to the kitchen and pulling out a bottle of champagne from the refrigerator. I think we should toast. To what? I popped the cork and poured 2 glasses of Dom Perignon, the same brand that had been served at her party the night everything went sideways between us. To second chances. To honesty. To being family, without the performance anxiety. Sarah took her glass and raised it toward mine. To my brother, who turned out to be full of surprises. The crystal glasses chimed together softly, and we drank champagne while watching the city light up below us as night fell. After Sarah left, I sat alone in my penthouse, thinking about how much had changed in just a few hours. The weight I'd been carrying, the resentment and hurt from her public humiliation, had finally lifted. Not completely, but enough to let me breathe freely again. My phone buzzed with a text message. Thank you for giving me a chance to make this right. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful you're willing to try. Also, your place is absolutely incredible. I'm proud to be your sister again. I smiled and typed back. We're going to be okay. Because we were. Not perfect, not instantly repaired, but moving in the right direction. And sometimes that's the best you can hope for with family. The next morning, I woke up to find 3 missed calls from our mother. Daniel, honey, Sarah told us about your new apartment. And your business success. We're so proud of you, but also confused about why you didn't tell us. Can you call me back? We'd love to see your place sometime. I laughed, imagining the conversations Sarah must have had with our parents. The daughter they'd bragged about to their friends was now explaining that their son, the one they'd worried about, was actually the more financially successful of their 2 children. But that was a conversation for another day. For now, I was content to sit in my penthouse, looking out at the city I'd conquered quietly, sipping coffee and working on my next venture. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about proving other people wrong. It was about being right with yourself, regardless of what anyone else thought. But vindication, when it came naturally and honestly, wasn't entirely unpleasant either. The freeloader had bought himself a castle in the sky, and his sister had finally learned to knock before entering.